Hello, I am Mantastic and Fantastic, and today I'm going to be discussing the Hera-Is ranking tournament strategies that should be used in the upcoming event. So, ranking tournaments are finally coming back to North America. I thought they had forgotten all about us and the chance to get crowns as well as complete all of our various quests. And ranking tournaments can be fun and or stressful or a very large magic stone sink because to a certain extent, like, they try and test our skills, but by testing it's more so who can refresh the most with their stamina, because it's a matter of just trying over and over again to that perfect run to score at your desired finishing point. So, because there has been a very long gap and delay between the last ranking dungeon, a lot of the strategies that were used for the Hera-Is tournament in Japan are no longer as meta or applicable because newer toys have come out that can actually elevate and pad our scores. So instead of looking necessarily to Japan for inspiration, we might actually be looking at EU for inspiration, because EU or Europe has been having ranking dungeons at a very delayed pace, but they've had some in the last couple of months, and they have been able to actually utilize the toys we have available for the most part. So this post will be covering what I feel is going to be the stronger teams and or compositions or strategies to score high in this ranking dungeon. So as with any ranking dungeon, we are scored based on 3 criteria. The first one is average combos made, and for each average combo made, you score 5,000 points. Time remaining is 500 points per second remaining. All of these can be rounded to the nearest 0.1, by the way. And then lastly is maximum damage, up to 10,000 points when you hit 40 million. And that's 40 million across the whole team. It's all 6 cards dealing damage. If you are able to hit, say, 50 million, it means nothing. If you hit like 100 million, you still get the 10,000. So brutally overkilling a floor doesn't accomplish anything. So as long as you know you can hit that damage cap, that's all you need to pursue. So, a dungeon at the glance. So basically there are 6 floors in Hera-Is, and the highest health spawn is Hera-Is herself with 3.7 or 3.8 million health. That is really not meaningful or substantial. Like, we can easily blast our way through that, to be honest. However, one thing to note is that the 4th floor has 3 million health and has a 50% damage reduction versus light. So this means that light-based teams will not be able to pad their damage as easily, because wood teams can obviously pad against the 2 blue floors, water teams can pad against the first floor of the 1 Pendra, as well as Hino as well, but as well as fire having an advantage. But fire gets negated quite strongly by the water floor. So basically you want to try and pick a color that can double their damage as efficiently if possible to maximize your scoring output. So as a summary, and I clearly didn't even click continue reading, all floors obviously have a significant amount of health, like it's 1 point something million. You can't button your way through it, so we can basically remove that strategy from the equation. God Killer is actually of quite significant value because Hino, Floor 5 Artemis, and Floor 6 Hera all have God typing. So God Killer actually has the most value of anything in this dungeon. Dragon and Balance do have merits as well, but I feel like God Killer would be the most beneficial awakening to have if you had to pick one killer awakening. And I already mentioned light is already disadvantaged, but dark is also disadvantaged because there are no light spawns, so again, dark doesn't get a chance to pad their damage as efficiently. There are no pre-draws, so that's good because I know previous ranking dungeons we had to deal with pre-draws, and it's a matter of just wasting an active seal. It's just not a fun mechanic overall. And the first floor will spawn will spawn fire orbs and lock all
Fantastic
fire orbs.
Follower alert! Wow!
As well as darken 3 orbs at random for 5 turns. So those darkened orbs can be matched away, but they can interfere with your puzzling skills potentially if you don't memorize exactly what colors they were. So I'm still going to show what the Japan top 10 scores were. It's all Ace Bastet, but that really means nothing because the strategies and teams we are going to use is not going to necessarily follow here. However, you can gain an understanding that people like to use Ace Bastet because of the God Killers on the leaders, as well as being green to pad your damage against Hera-Is or the Fenrir. The main idea is you have green cards, and that is a favorable color to be in this dungeon. So now we want to look at the current EU trends, because Europe has the exact same monster roster lineup as we do in North America, and because of that we can kind of gain inspiration as to what they have been using to great success in their ranking dungeons, because they're even more behind than North America. So for the most part, at least I went back in time to ranking dungeons in Europe, all the top 10s feature a 7x6 leader and some other pairing alongside of it. And that should be a relatively strong indication as to what is going to be the trend for us in North America. We want to try and utilize 7x6 leaders. And at the moment, the best 7x6 leaders to utilize are Ilmina and Diabolus, because both Ilmina and Diabolus have exceptionally high multipliers for a 7x6 leader. So that means you're able to more easily hit that damage cap as well as clear floors without necessarily an active skill if you're using certain leaders. So Ilmina is obviously a more luxurious build you have to use, because in theory the only bicolor board changes you can use are Ilms and Ilminas, and that is quite challenging. I have neither across all of my accounts, so it's not exactly a common card to have, whereas Diabolus can really just use almost any bicolor board changer they want because they're not restricted to matching 2 specific colors. And with Diabolus you have lots of different leadership pairings, and as long as you don't actually have a leader that forces you to connect multiple orbs together, you can use almost anything paired with Diabolus. And that flexibility is going to probably be the go-to option for the average player, because in theory, you can load up on, say, Sonya's who have bicolor board changers, and that dark sub-attribute is going to be dealing meaningful damage from Diabolus himself, as well as the Sonya sub-attribute or any other card that has those colors. So again, you need to obviously look at your monster box. If you can build the Ilmina team, go for it, because in theory, Ilmina will allow you to have up to 6 bicolor board changers, whereas Diabolus would only allow you to have 5. So in 7x6, you want to basically organize your board differently, because I'm still working on my 7x6 guide. These things take time, unfortunately, but with a 7x6 board, the reason why it's going to be so popular is because you have 42 instead of the regular 30 orbs. That means those 12 additional orbs can equate to 14 more combos. So in theory, you can almost always match 8, 9, 10 combos from a given board, especially if you pop a bicolor or tricolor board changer. You can have a much easier time moving forward. And for the most part, I like to match 7x6 boards vertically because the spacing just fits out a little nicer. If you were to go horizontally, you have like a 3 and a 4. Something, it just feels a little awkward, depends on how you build it up. Whereas vertically, you get 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and then you can switch to horizontally later. Again, that's going to be in my guide. Hopefully I can make that sooner rather than later. So outside of 7x6, what are some points to consider for this ranking dungeon? So light and dark teams are disadvantaged naturally because we don't have an easy floor to pad our damage. With that being said, we may just have leaders that be doing so much damage anyways that it's not an issue hitting damage cap. But if your team is very rainbow sparse and using board changers that don't hit all the colors, it may be something to keep in mind. You want to utilize Killer Awakenings, because if we look up here, that is going to be helping us pad our damage, because you can see all the different typings that are available in this dungeon. And like I already mentioned, God Killer is going to have the most value, but Balance Killer does as well. Now, another thing to keep in mind is you can also have certain cards stack those killers. Say you had a card that had God and Attacker Killer, which is Dil Sirius, for example. You're going to be dealing 9 times damage against Hino, and he's probably going to be hitting the damage cap almost by himself. So if you can stack killers or even the latent killers effectively, this is going to help pad your score overall. So I already mentioned, again, a 7x6 is kind of the way of the future because of the bigger board, more combos you can make, the easier it is to match things overall. It's just going to give you a much higher score overall. And now, outside of Killer Awakenings, other beneficial awakenings that you can run are 7 combo and TPA. Now, 7 combo is the more desirable option because you don't have to modify or adjust your matching or combo playstyle, because you just basically match combos. If you have a 7x6 board, you should always hit 7+ combos anyways, so you're going to be dealing very respectable damage from those cards against every single spawn, because killers only work against certain spawns. Yes, it's 3 times versus the 2 times from 7 combo, but again, we're trying to look for ways to squeeze out damage, if at all possible, with less matching or active skills used, because we want to try and use these bicolor actives. And by using bicolor active skills, you are going to be forming a board of just 2 elements. And with those 2 elements, you should be able to puzzle it relatively fast and make a very big combo board and score amazingly high. So in theory, you want to try and squeeze in as many bicolor board active skills as you possibly can. And obviously, not every player has a full roster they can fill it out, but the more you use, the better off you will be. So if you don't have enough bicolor board changers, I would go for tricolor, because tricolor at least gives you an option. Like, the whole idea is to condense the board down to as few elements as possible to make for easier matching. And now, Hera-Is dungeon has a no inherits clause. So that means you cannot inherit active skills onto certain bases to keep your team more monocolored or utilize subs that you would rather have. So we need to actually count our skill boost and be very conscious and mindful of it, because before we could just put Tengu and slap any active skill we want on top of it, and then we would go on a merry little way. We'd have enough skill boost to have everything up in time. So it's going to be sometimes challenging for a lot of players to build a specific team that has enough skill boost to power your way through the dungeon. Now, with that being said, you could still utilize a Tengu or something like along those lines if you need a little bit of help pushing yourself through the dungeon, but it's going to give you a bit of dead weight because that card itself cannot have an active skill that has merits. Another thing to keep in mind is you do have at least 6 floors in the dungeon, so that means you will have 5 turns worth of charging up by the time you get to Hera-Is. You basically can have a cooldown gain 5 turns, and by the time you get to Hera-Is, you can pop that active skill. So you can plan things out around the fact that this dungeon has some floors. You don't have to have everything ready by turn 1. It's obviously nice, but you don't have to. And if all else fails, you can still use the skill boost solo mode badge. That will give you +1 skill boost, and it might make or break your run. So, special things you need to bring. So in this dungeon, there are no actual hard, fast requirements you need to have for the dungeon because there are no real strange or bizarre mechanics. Yes, locked fire orbs are an inconvenience, but the thing is, it's not the end of the world. Like, you can still puzzle your way around it, you can still match them. And yes, there are 3 darkened orbs, but 3 darkened orbs means you can still match them. And if you could remember what those colors were, you could match them away. Again, if you use a board changer, pick one of those orbs to start and then start matching. You can eventually get rid of that dark orb over time, or just pray you happen to match it in the correct spot. Like, you have a 50-50 chance of a bicolor board changer, so why not take that risk sometimes? Because again, we're kind of rolling the dice to get those perfect runs to score higher, so there's going to be a lot of quitting and restarting. Other than that, you should really just have 100% skill bind resistance because Hera-Is does have a preemptive skill bind, but again, you could ignore that completely if you don't plan to use an active skill against her. So we have no real specific mechanics we need to counter or compromise for our team. So in conclusion, the delayed ranking dungeon debut for the North American server is going to be problematic because a lot of the inspiration we could draw from the Japanese server does not hold true. Also, a lot of strategies that we may have invested in or heavily built up are no longer as meta as they used to be. It's not going to be as efficient because we may not be able to score as well because 7x6 is kind of the way of the future. So with that all being said, you can still obviously use more older tactics, but you may not necessarily score as high if you're trying to min-max your score to the limit and try and get those crowns. So, as a last parting piece of advice, I would highly encourage you to go into your options and turn off your skills. By turning off your skills, you will save yourself an extra couple of seconds every time you pop an active skill. It's going to give you a significantly higher score, and it's just something you should be doing for every single ranking dungeon. So, let me know what you think you are going to be using for this ranking dungeon in the comments below. What strategies have you come up with? Do you think you're going to be using 7x6 or sticking with 6x5 leaders and using different strategies? Hopefully you all have a mantastic day and happy puzzling.